Tell me about your problems, please. I want to hear. I want to help. You see, I am a member of a brotherhood of unfortunate men. Women consume our thoughts, don't they? We can't get girls to pay attention to us. We don't know how to entertain them once we catch their eye. We don't know how to make them happy after they decide our pathetic souls are worth their troubles. We are lost at sea, adrift. We all have our problems. It's just that my problems are worse than yours. Twice as bad, actually. Sorry, I'm being selfish. I'm not looking for sympathy, really. I see lonely people and my heart hurts because I know what they are missing. I know how wonderful it is to love someone and receive love in return. I couldn't be more deeply in love than I am right now. I'm hopeless. The fact that this love is based on lies, deceit, and my willingness to ignore reality does not change anything. I'm in love. I'm in love and everything will be fine for a few more weeks before the truth comes out and my life changes forever. How I would like to close my eyes and isolate myself from the whole world. But now, it's too late. I have to explain. A Friday night in April and going to bars didn't appeal to me. I wanted silence, and I got it. A good book in a comfortable chair and no one to distract me. But around 9 o'clock, I had a strong urge to eat mint chocolate chip ice cream. I couldn't get rid of it. I just had to eat some. So 10 minutes later, I was in the supermarket, stomping down the frozen food aisle. The glass door of the freezer was open. Another snack lover was rummaging around in search of a quart of the creamy treat. The glass was so foggy that I couldn't see who it was, and I tapped my foot, patiently waiting for my turn. The door slowly slammed shut, and it was like a curtain rising as actors take the stage. She looked up, saw me watching, and gave me a sweet, serene smile, and all thoughts of ice cream flew out of my head. It was love at first sight. I mean love, not lust, not a chemical imbalance polluting my brain. It was Cupid's arrow, straight to my heart. She was wearing old jeans and a gray sweatshirt, and her dark brown hair was pulled back into a ponytail. She was the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. She was tall and very slender, and her skin was as flawless as porcelain. Her eyes were dark blue, like the deep ocean. She looked like a porcelain doll. But she looked me straight in the eyes, and her frank smile told me that she was not a doll. She was definitely a real girl. "Looks like I'm not the only one with a sweet tooth," she said in a flute-like voice, showing me 2 pints of butter pecans. Uh-huh, I said. She was so beautiful that I just stared at her until she asked me what flavor I was looking for. "It doesn't matter," I said, shocked by her beauty. We chatted for a few minutes. I don't remember what we talked about, but she was sweet and kind and laughed at my lame jokes. We finally made it to the checkout and paid for our items. Her car was parked on one side, mine on the other. It's now or never, buddy. I know this sounds crazy. I don't hit on girls in grocery stores, but would you like to have dinner with me sometime? Or coffee? Or ice cream? Or with pleasure? Her smile was completely guileless, showing off each of her purely perfect teeth. Every time she smiled, tiny wrinkles would form around her dark blue eyes, and it just shocked me. It gave me butterflies. It was one of those rare, perfect moments in life that you know you'll treasure forever. Perfect. "Sorry, I don't even know your name." "I'm Mike." I extended my hand. She paused. "I'm Lynn." Her cool fingers lay in my palm. We exchanged phone numbers and shyly said goodbye. I got into the car and sat there for a long time, pressing the hand that touched Lynn to my face. I was so far away. I returned home to my empty apartment and bumped into walls for an hour. I had to tell someone what happened. I knew my friend Rick was gone for the night, but I dialed his number and left a message. "Ricky, I just met the most amazing, incredible, beautiful girl in the world." It turned out that I was only half right. I called her on Saturday. She was free. We agreed on a date. All day I was like a child whose parents told him they were going to Disneyland. Tomorrow. Overexcited. Bounced off the walls. You know when you ask a girl out on a date, a girl you just met, you really don't have a good idea of what she looks like? That is, you find her attractive enough to take the risk of asking her out. But when you close your eyes and try to picture her, she's still vague. It was the same with Lynn. I knew she was beautiful, but when I dreamed about her, about kissing her, making love to her, which I did all day. I could not focus on her. So when I rang the doorbell at her house, I was rocking back and forth on my toes with anticipation. I couldn't wait to meet her. And when the door opened, and she appeared, again in jeans and with her hair in a ponytail, I sighed like a loving calf. "Hello, Lynn." She smiled at me with her megawatt smile, the corners of her eyes crinkling like the night before, her perfect teeth sparkling like little white stones. "I'm not Lynn," she giggled. For a moment, my brain didn't work. "Isn't she Lynn? It's not calculable. Isn't this the angel I met last night?" For a sickening second, I thought this was some cruel way to fight back at me. "I'm Amy," she said. "Sister Lynn. Sister—" The voice in my head sounded like Darth Vader when he reads Luke's thoughts and learns the truth about Princess Leia. I guess she didn't tell you she had a twin?" "No." She giggled musically. "I didn't mean to scare you like that. Come on in. Identical twins. What do you know?" I followed Amy up the stairs and resisted the urge to kiss her. I was shocked. I fell in love with Lynn the moment I saw her. I felt exactly the same rush of bliss when I saw Amy. Was I in love? Crazy? When Amy turned and asked me to sit down and my stomach did a somersault, I knew I was in trouble. "How's your ice cream?" I asked. Exactly what I wanted. We were watching the movie, Lynn looked at me, and we said at the same time, "Creamy pecan." She lost in a coin toss to determine who should go to the grocery store. Coin toss. If it had come up heads instead of tails, I would have asked Amy out the night before. I would be talking to Lynn right now. What if they went together? Would I choose one over the other? I felt guilty even thinking about it. They were two personalities, two different people who turned out to be very similar to each other. I looked at Amy and decided that I was old enough to consider her the sister of the girl I was crazy about. I was mentally patting myself on the back when I heard a soft voice behind me. "Hello, Mike." The most beautiful girl in the world stood at the door. Her hair fell in copper waves to her shoulders. Her blue eyes shone like stars. Her lips were the same pale purple color as the loose-fitting blouse she wore. It took my breath away. I stood on shaky legs. "You look great." She smiled. Her smile was exactly the same as Amy's, right down to the wrinkles around her eyes. I looked at Lynn, then at Amy, then back at Lynn. "I probably should have warned you," Lynn said with a familiar chuckle. "Of course, identical twins look alike, that's the whole point. But even twins have subtle differences here and there that make one person too unique." Lynn and Amy, as far as I could tell, were completely identical. It was only the second time I had seen Lynn and her twin for the first time, but the effect was amazing. It was as if they could teleport across the room. I looked that way, and she was sitting in the living room. I looked that way, and she was standing in the doorway. "Warned me about what?" I asked. They both laughed, and it was creepy. They laughed exactly the same way. Their faces took on the same expression. But what beautiful faces. Lynn and I went out to dinner, then took a long walk in the local park and talked for hours. I learned that Lynn's parents died when the twins were 2 years old, and they were raised by their maternal grandmother. He and Amy both taught 3rd grade in neighboring school districts. And yes, she knew how amazingly similar she and her sister were. "Even our friends have difficulty distinguishing us." "Have you ever had different hairstyles? Have you ever dyed your hair?" "I like my hair the way it is now, and so does Amy." "Don't you?" I told her that yes. I told her that to change her beautiful hair in any way would be a crime against humanity. I thought she would laugh, but she didn't. There was a sudden, serious silence. We stopped under a lamppost. The sun was setting. It was a magnificent evening. She looked at me, waiting for me to do what I wanted to do all evening. "I'm very glad I met you last night," I said. "Me too." I leaned over. She leaned over. And we kissed. It was a quick kiss. Just a few seconds of my lips touching hers. She put her hand on my shoulder, and I put mine on her thigh. "I think I like you," she said. Very. I think I like you too. We kissed again, this time a little longer. When we parted, she ran her thumb over my lips. Lipstick. We walked back to the car hand in hand. I wanted to tell her that I love her. I wanted to ask her to marry me. I wanted to jump on the roof of my car and make monkey noises. Instead, I drove her home and walked her to the door. I had a great time, she said. Me too. Will you call me again? Are you kidding? Maybe I'll call you from the entrance before I leave. She giggled, then her face became serious, and we kissed goodnight. When she walked through the door, I saw Amy sitting in the living room. She smiled and waved at me. I waved back. Bye, Lynn said. I lingered on the threshold with my eyes closed, enjoying the moment. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I heard a voice outside the door. There was a chuckle, and then a faint voice. Do you like him too? That was the word, Sammy, which threw me into confusion. I was already a little shocked by my reaction to meeting Amy. Does she really like me? It seemed, at the same time, too strange and too good to be true. As I walked back to the car, I thought about this. Perhaps Lynn had described me to Amy, and now that we had met, Lynn wanted Amy's opinion. This made sense. It's just, something didn't give me peace. When it dawned on me, I was approaching an intersection and almost ran a red light. The voice that I heard, it was weak, much weaker than a giggle. It must have been Amy who asked the question. Why would Amy ask Lynn if she likes me? Same? It didn't make sense. Maybe I misheard. But that's not true. I was sure I heard Amy. And what did that mean? I came home, undressed, lay down under the covers and decided that it didn't mean anything. I was in love. I met the girl I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I fell asleep, dreaming of the day when Lynn would lay next to me and cuddle me all night long. It was the easiest night I've known. On Sunday, I called Lynn around 11. Hearing her voice, hearing her laugh at my jokes, I put all my worries out of my head. I want to see you, and I said, do you know where I live? I can be there in 15 minutes. Then why are we still talking on the phone? 18 minutes later, I was sitting on the couch. Lynn was sitting on my lap, and we were kissing. My hands rested on her tiny waist, moving millimeters towards her breasts. It happened so quickly, she said. Too fast? She kissed me deeply. Not fast enough. I let my hand move up, until my palm rested on her breast. She closed her eyes. Her breasts were small and firm, and she wasn't wearing a bra. I've never felt this way about a girl before, I said. Not so fast. She kissed me. She then ran her thumb over my lips. Lipstick. If she had slapped me, I wouldn't have been so shocked. She did the exact same thing last night. Similar, but it wasn't the same. There was something wrong with this gesture. I couldn't explain. Of course, she can do the same thing 2 days in a row. I liked it when she did it the night before. I liked it even now. But it wasn't the same. I looked into her sparkling blue eyes and felt like I was looking at a stranger. It wasn't Lynn. It was Amy. I was sure of it. She leaned over, we kissed, and a shiver ran through my body. What is this? She asked. Nothing, I said, but I couldn't control my face or my voice. Honey, what? I thought about honest lies. I almost said those 3 little words, but it's too early for that. I touched her cheek with my fingertips. She looked at me with such tenderness that it broke my heart. This is too early. I know, I interrupted. But now that you look so beautiful, I can't stop my feelings. She took my hand, lifted my shirt, and pressed it to her bare chest. It's hard for me, too. The room spun around me. I didn't know if it was Lynn or Amy. I didn't know if I cared. All I knew was that the warm breast in my palm felt wonderful. When will Amy come home? Soon. How soon? Too soon, she whispered. It turned out that 30 seconds had passed. We heard the garage door go up, so we had time to separate and take a few deep breaths. Amy walked up the stairs carrying 2 bags of groceries and said, Children, you weren't being capricious, were you? No, Lynn giggled. I didn't giggle. I guffawed. Today both twins had their hair down. They were both wearing jeans and t-shirts. They both wore pale purple lipstick. and they looked exactly the same. I couldn't tell them apart. Never. I couldn't tell which one I was in love with. My mind couldn't comprehend that the girl walking up the stairs was not the same girl I was with the night before. And the feeling that I had just kissed Amy was stronger than ever. "Do you need help moving things?" I asked. "Oh no, thanks," Amy said and smiled at me, and Lynn smiled back at me. I felt it in all my bones. I needed to get out of there, right now. I had to think. I should have screamed. "Oh shit, is it already noon?" I asked. Lynn looked at the wall clock behind me. 12:15. "I forgot. I have to call my mom and tell her when I'm coming for dinner tonight. I always have dinner on Sunday with my family." "That's so sweet," Lynn said. "You can use our phone." "Actually, I have to go. I have things to do around the house." I smiled slyly at her. "I didn't plan on rushing here this morning." She smiled back. "Let me walk you to the car." At my car, she hugged me and kissed me on the lips. "This is madness. I just met you, and I feel like I know you so well." "Me too," I lied. "It can be so hard to trust someone that much, but I knew as soon as I met you that you would never do anything bad to me." "I would never," I said, and I meant it. "Go home, call your mom. I can't wait to tell her about the incredible girl I met." She liked it, she smiled, and her eyes sparkled. I kissed her goodbye. I watched her walk back into the house as I drove away. I drove about 100 meters, turned onto a side street, and parked. My hands were shaking. Was I crazy? Is it possible to imagine that these two girls, in turn, were with me? I couldn't imagine that Lynn would be so perverted as to do something like that. But did I even know who Lynn was? Who did I meet that first evening? Who did I go to dinner with? Who breast did I touch? Were they all the same person? Did I really want to know? I started the car and drove home. I tried to think. The most obvious and direct solution was to ask Lynn if they had played a game with me. I could only imagine her reaction. Outrage would have been quite reasonable. No, I had to figure this out myself. Maybe I just have an overactive imagination? But I didn't think so. When I got home, I rummaged around in my desk and found a 3-subject notebook with a university paper. I took out a pen and wrote, 14th of April. I wrote a short description of what happened the evening I met Lynn. Then I took notes for the last 2 days. I called the next 2 sections, number 1 and number 2. The girl I met at the grocery store, I called number 1. I called the girl I just kissed number 2. I kept trying to build a dossier on each twin, trying to find tiny differences between them that would help me prove or debunk my hypothesis. That's what I called the woman I loved, number 1. The next 3 months did not help me solve the mystery. My friends loved Lynn when they met her, and they loved even more the fact that she had a twin sister. They asked me to accommodate them. I refused. I lied and told them that Amy had just gone through a bad breakup and wasn't ready to date. They asked me again and again, "How the hell do you tell them apart?" They harassed me, and I ignored them. I didn't ignore my dilemma. I was struggling to figure out if the twins were playing some sick game, or if I was the sick one. The results were inconclusive. I filled the notebook with observations, guesses, suspicions. I took a lot of photos of Lynn, and she never objected. I took a few pictures of the twins together, and again, no problem. I studied these photographs as carefully as a CIA analyst searches for nuclear sites in Iraq. My wild eye could not detect any obvious physical differences. None. 0. Same height, up to a centimeter. Same weight, up to a gram. The same smile, the same lips, the same eyes, the same hair. Both girls had beautiful hair, dark brown with streaks of brown and red. I tried to find subtle differences in the shades and patterns of these stripes, but could not. Their hair was identical, down to the individual strands. It wasn't just their faces that were the same. I started looking for tiny differences that wouldn't be easy to imitate. The problem was that they didn't have any tiny differences. No moles, no scars, no blemishes. Their skin was as clear as milk. Over the course of a week, I scrutinized Lynn's nails to see if, say, the nail on her index finger had grown half an inch. Nothing. I massaged her and memorized the pattern of freckles on her neck. They never changed. One evening, our kissing became even more intense than usual, and she took off her shirt and let me fondle her breasts. While I was caressing her, I carefully studied the shape, size, and taste of her breasts. The next 4 times I took her shirt off, they looked the same. They tasted the same. I searched the internet for tips on fingerprinting and analysis, but Lynn was always conscientious about cleaning up after dinner and washing the dishes, so I couldn't get fingerprints off her glasses. They seemed to be identical down to the molecular level. What about their friends? I hoped that the people who had known the twins the longest could help me understand the situation. It turned out that although Lynn and Amy were very friendly girls and knew a lot of people, they did not have what could be called close friends, buddies, or girlfriends. For this, they had each other. But they didn't live on the island, so I got to know their fellow teachers, neighbors, and a few friends from school. And each of them, 5 minutes after meeting, asked me the same question. So, you know how to distinguish them? Because I cannot. There was one girl, Donna, who could probably be called the twins' best friend. She went to school and college with them. She knew Lynn and Amy longer than anyone in the world. My gang went to a sports bar for a hockey game, and the twins brought Donna with them. At this point, I had been dating Lynn for about 2 months and was desperately searching for information that could either prove or disprove my hypothesis. During the first intermission, Lynn told me that Donna thought my friend Pete was cute. Donna was short, blonde, and perky, and Lynn asked me if I could put in a good word for her. I said sure. But when Lynn came back to the bar, I told Donna it would cost her dearly. Is it true? What do you want? I took her hand and sat her down on the seat next to mine. Information. For the next 15 minutes, I questioned Donna about Lynn. Most of the information she gave me was useless, but there was one topic we discussed that was very enlightening. I asked about Lynn's ex-boyfriends, and she replied, "Well, she doesn't have any." What? No one? She shook her head. I mean, she dated a lot of guys, both her and Amy, but neither of them ever had a real steady boyfriend. You are a record holder. It was hard for me to believe it, and I said so. I know we talked about this. I mean, the other girls in our group were still at school. Lynn was dating a guy, and Amy said she didn't like him. Amy was dating someone, and Lynn was shaking her head and saying she didn't understand what Amy saw in him. They had some pretty nasty fights over this. I can't imagine them quarreling. They never quarreled and never quarrel, except over boys. I don't know. Maybe when one is dating, the other is afraid of being abandoned, and they quarrel. I've never met 2 people who were closer to each other than Lynn and Amy. You have to remember that all the family they've ever had is themselves. I had one question to ask, and I drank the last 100 grams of my Rolling Rock before I mustered up the courage. Is Lynn a virgin? Her lips curled. I don't think I should answer this question. I shook my head. You're right. It would be wrong for me to even ask. A huge roar filled the bar as the penguins tied the match. Donna took a long sip of her beer and leaned forward. Yes, she does. Oh, I said, trying not to show my delight. Amy, too. I said, oh, again. The waitress came and I ordered another portion. I need to know something. Can you tell them apart? Is there a trick to this? Something that you understand since you've known them for so long? She shrugged and shook her head. I can't tell them apart. No one at school can either. She looked over my shoulder, making sure the twins were engrossed in their game. Lynn is better at math than Amy. Amy has good English. Back in high school and college, they swapped places on tests. Nobody ever noticed this. Me too. Lynn told me one evening when she had a little too much to drink. Wow, I said, more worried than I could have imagined. I know you don't think that such nice girls could do something, well, dishonest, but they did it. Our waitress placed 2 green bottles on the table, and I took a long sip from mine. I looked at Lynn, who was watching the game with a fierce expression on her face, and Donna took my hand to redirect my attention. She's a wonderful girl. I love her to death. If you hurt her, I'll kick your ass. A minute later, I was introducing Donna to Peta. I stayed long enough to let their conversation get heated, and then I left them and sat down in my seat, next to Lynn. What were you talking about? She wanted to warn me about what would happen if I ever hurt you. She's cruel, did you know that? She giggled. Then why are you setting her up with Pete? Because I don't like Pete. Do you even watch the game? Amy complained, and just as she turned, Mario Lemieux fired the puck between the goalie's legs. The bar exploded, and as I watched Amy's face turn from me to the screen and then bloom with an expression of joy, I remembered the same expression on the face of the girl I kissed under the lamppost in the park. I turned to my left and the same triumphant smile appeared on Lynn's face. I shouted something appropriate and let Lynn kiss me, but my heart was uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that the girl kissing me today was not the same girl I kissed the day before. It turned out that it was not just a feeling, because a few weeks later, I got some proof. The first time Lynn visited my house, I gave her a big tour. I made dinner, and we both cleaned up after it. A week later, Lynn came again, and I was very curious to see if Lynn knew the way. She passed the exam with flying colors. She knew where the bathroom was. When I asked her to get coffee from the cupboard, she knew which one to look in. The first time she came, she especially liked the photograph of Pittsburgh at night that hangs in my office. When she saw her again, she said, "I really like this photo," as if she had already commented on it before. But the first time Lynn came to see me, I showed her a photo of me and my mom when I graduated from college. It was on the table in my living room. When Lynn came the second time, I swapped the photos. It was still my graduation photo, but it was me and my Aunt Karen, my mother's sister. They are a little similar, but far from identical. It was a setup. I led Lynn over to the couch, sitting her down so she could see the photo. When we saw the movie and I went to get some popcorn, Lynn greeted me with a smile and pointed to the photo. "You really have your mother's eyes," she said. She said the same thing a week before, made the same remark about my mother. And now, she said the same thing about my aunt. I felt something twist inside me, twist tightly, and then snap shut. "Oh, I got something in my eye," I said. I ran to the toilet, flushed the toilet, and vomited into the churning whirlpool. It wasn't Lynn. It was Amy. Or, this time, it was Lynn, and Amy was here the week before. Or, to be consistent, number 2 was here today and number 1 was here before. 2 weeks later, Lynn and I were having dinner with my parents. I introduced her to Mom and Dad and watched her reaction closely, and she was alone. She smiled at my father with her megawatt smile, but when she shook my mother's hand, she hesitated for a moment. There was a flash of confusion. Then she regained her composure, her smile began to shine, and everything was fine. As we were leaving the restaurant, my mother grabbed my hand. "If you let her go, I will disown you." We said our goodbyes, and then Lynn and I walked back to my car. "Your mother looks different than I imagined," she said. There was a tiny note in her voice. "Like this?" I answered, with practical nonchalance. "That photograph that you have at home?" She didn't look what I expected. I held the door for her, but she didn't come in. She looked at me. She suspected something. I was gripping the door handle so hard I thought I might break it off. "Her hair is completely different now," I said. "They used to be straight, but now she wears them curly." Lie. My mother's hair has been curly since the day she was born. My Aunt Karen's are straight as rain. The girl standing in front of me looked at the photo for only 5 seconds. She thought and thought. I smiled at her, and then her face softened and she leaned against the door. "I like your parents. They adore you. They like you more than me." She kissed me. "Let's go home." We went to her house, sat on the couch, and I kissed Amy for an hour. But that was the only mistake I managed to catch her on. It's not that I didn't keep trying. One evening, while we were at my house watching a movie, I asked Lynn if Amy had shown interest in any of my friends. I was just fishing. "No," she answered. "Do you mind if I invite Rick over someday and invite you and Amy over to see if they can get along?" For the first time, I sensed a chill in Lynn's musical voice. "I don't think Amy will be interested." "Oh, good." Why are you so determined to set my sister up with someone? She was upset, but hid it. I'm not in the mood. Rick's just a nice guy. He thinks Amy is nice. She's not dating anyone. I threw this phrase, catching a little more. I know Rick is a good guy, and if Amy wanted to date him, she would have let him know. Then she said something that cooled my brain. Wouldn't it bother you? Wouldn't it seem strange to you if my sister was dating one of your friends? It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it. Those blue eyes glared at me. She was angry. But the reason for her anger remained unspoken. Why should this bother me? I asked. Even if it bothered me, it would drive me crazy. If the twins really traded back and forth with me, the girl I loved would go to the movies with Rick. And this was completely unacceptable. Lynn still hasn't answered my question, so I asked it again. She paused, thinking. Then she said, and if Amy starts dating Rick and it doesn't work out, wouldn't it be hard for him to see us together? It was plausible. Her fears made sense, and it was nonsense. That wasn't what she was upset about. She was upset because if Amy started dating Rick, she would date Rick too. She was upset because both twins were dating me and didn't want to date anyone else. I know that sounds arrogant. Nothing could be further from the truth. She looked at me, and there was a challenge in her eyes. Come on, her eyes said. Ask. Or maybe I was just imagining it. Not that it matters. I didn't have the courage. Well, I think I understand you. She smiled, I think relieved that I passed the test. It's nice that you want Amy to be as happy as you made me. Did I make you happy? Very happy. She kissed me, hard. I put my hands on her chest. She unbuttoned my shirt and ran her hands over my chest and stomach. Then her hand went down to my thigh. She said, Honey, I want to do something with you. With me. What? I said, watching her hand move between my legs. Her tongue touched her upper lip. I want you to feel good. Lynn. She began to unbuckle my belt. My breathing quickened. She didn't mean to. No. You're so big, she whispered. She didn't have to do this. I wanted to tell her that she didn't have to do that. I still loved her. I wanted to tell her this, but the words wouldn't come. She said, I want to show you how much love I can give you. She gave me great pleasure. Lynn, I love you, I said. I wondered what Lynn would be like in bed. She was so innocent that I thought she might not be so open sexually. Forget about it. I couldn't imagine her being a wild cat in bed. I didn't see that in her. And now she made me whine like a puppy, completely under her control. I think you liked it, she giggled. Oh, yes, I sobbed. I was in tears. I was confused. I was happy as only a person can be happy, and terribly confused. Did you seriously say that you love me? She asked. I looked into her eyes. I fell in love with you as soon as I saw you. Say it again. I repeated, and she said, I love you too. And we lay there for a long time, hugging each other. She said, I'm not ready for sex yet. This is fine? Yes, of course, I was disappointed because I wanted to make love to her and because Amy was going out of town for a few days, and we had all the time we wanted to be alone. I looked into her bottomless blue eyes and ran my fingertips along the line of her jaw. I can wait. Is it okay if I continue to pleasure you? I like it. I laughed. No, everything is okay. It was too good to be true. And a few hours later, as I lay in bed and mentally replayed this scene, this thought stuck in my head. It was too good to be true. I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened the bottom drawer. There was a notepad there. In it, I wrote my entry about the incredible events of that day. This part of the notebook was almost full, but the sections about number 1 and number 2 were not so heavily covered. But since Amy was out of town, and I was sure it was Amy because she was chaperoning a school field trip, I filled 2 pages with notes about number 1. That's when I came up with my theory about why Lynn wanted to wait before we made love. Because Amy wasn't there. Perhaps there was some kind of agreement between them. Maybe there was some kind of pattern to this. I met number 1. My first date was with number 2. It was number 1 who came to my house for the first time, number 2 who met my parents. It was number 1 that made me happy. And if my theory is correct, then the first time we made love would be with number 2. They must be witches, succubi. sucking the life out of me and leaving behind an empty husk. Those intense, meaningful glances they exchanged. What did they convey? Did they have one mind, divided between two identical bodies? They were binary souls, digital, 1 and 0, on and off. They created their own personal wireless internet, downloading each other's thoughts, memories, and experiences in nanoseconds, downloading gigabytes of data with just a tilt of their head. I realized that I was a little afraid of them. If they are capable of such monstrous deception, what else can they do? I didn't sleep well that night. I tossed and turned, trying to figure out a way out of this situation. I had to confront them, tell them I know their secret, tell them this has to stop now. But I didn't have the courage. What if they deny it? What then? How do I explain that for the last 3 months I suspected I was kissing Amy but didn't say anything about it? And, horror of horrors, what if I was wrong, but I was not mistaken? I eventually fell asleep, and when I woke up, I discovered that I had come up with another way to solve the problem. All I had to do was kill Amy. Problem solved. I ate a bowl of cereal and thought about the best way to kill the sister of the woman I loved. Her death will truly set me free. She will break Lynn's heart, but maybe it will only bring us closer. Trauma would have tied her to me so tightly that nothing could ever come between us. I can't say exactly how long I thought about killing Amy, but I ate 3 bowls of frosted mini-wheats while thinking about it. The practical problems were as daunting as the moral ones. Killing Amy wouldn't improve my chances with Lynn if she found out I did it, and I couldn't figure out how to do it and get away with it. Shoot her? Poison her? Run over her with a car? Hired killer? And how could I be sure that it was Amy who killed and not Lynn? To me, it still mattered, although now I couldn't be sure which of my fond memories were associated with Lynn and which were associated with Amy. It didn't matter. I wanted Lynn, or number 1, and I didn't know who she was. I couldn't risk killing her. I think this is all nonsense, all these conspiracies. I'm not a killer. I wouldn't hurt a fly. But my feelings for Lynn were so strong that there was nothing I wouldn't do to keep her. Anything but murder. I was sure that I would draw the line at murder. If I couldn't kill Amy, then perhaps I could mark her in such a way that Lynn couldn't do it again. If, say, I accidentally cut her shoulder so that it leaves a permanent scar, or throw boiling water on her and it leaves a red burn mark. That will work too. But I wasn't sure I could do anything truly terrible to Amy. I was either too cowardly or too decent to do anything irreversible. Draw the line. This gave me an idea that seemed so good at the time. I went to the local shopping center and wandered around for a bit. There was a large art supply store there with paints, brushes, canvases, and more. I wandered around the aisles for a bit and found a huge display of magic markers. I read the labels of a half-dozen types and finally chose one that said, "Permanent ink, stains fabric, avoid skin contact, cannot be removed with lady soap." Perfect. Amy returned to town 2 days later, so according to my theory, it was Amy who showed up at my door at 7 p.m. that Saturday. I had just put the fish in the oven when she appeared and asked, "How long until dinner?" "Maybe in 20 minutes. Her dark eyes sparkled with lust. "This time is just enough." I sat down on the sofa as she lowered herself onto me again. If it was Amy and the first time Lynn, then I couldn't tell the difference. We ate. I was still in a kind of fugue state. My mind was racing. If only I didn't have these terrible doubts about the woman sitting opposite me, I would be the happiest man on earth, and not a tormented wretch stuffing salmon into my mouth without tasting it. She helped me wash the dishes. While she was putting the last pan in the dishwasher, I opened the drawer and took out a marker. I took out the recipe card and pretended to make a note on it. I tested the marker on myself by simply placing a dot on my armpit. It was still there after 3 days of intense scrubbing. She, of course, faded, but resisted with all her might. The marker was in my right hand, hidden with my palm so that only the wet tip stuck out. "Thank you, honey," I said, as she closed the dishwasher. I extended my arms, she stepped into my arms, and when we pulled away, I reached for her hands. My right hand rested on her left, and the marker did its job. I said, "Oh shit," as he drew a 10-centimeter-long stripe from the center of her palm to her wrist. She looked at her hand. She looked at her for a long time. "Sorry, I thought I was wearing a cap, She went to the sink and washed her hand. She doesn't come down. "Sorry, it's a permanent marker. It's not coming off," she interrupted, scrubbing the black line with a dish scraper. She scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed. I was afraid that she would be scraped until her flawless skin turned into raw meat. "Mike, she's not fucking coming down." This was the first time I heard her swear. Crap was her usual limit. My mouth was full of sand. I managed to blurt out, "It's okay, dear. It'll go away in a few days." "You did it on purpose?" She looked at me, and the light in her eyes went out. I managed a weak smile. "Why should I do this?" "I don't know," she said. But she knew. Otherwise, why would she be so upset? The kitchen was as quiet as a tomb. We stood and looked at each other like arrows. Neither of us said a word for a full 60 seconds. I didn't know what to say because what I wanted to say was unspeakable. I announced my suspicions by marking her with a marker. Now I was terrified. "I'm leaving," she said. She took her jacket from the chair. "Lynn, it was an accident. She didn't even look at me." Her jaw was clenched and her dark eyes were fierce. "Do not call me. Do not come to me. I do not want to see you." Before I could say another word, she disappeared. I was shocked. I looked out the window and saw her car driving out of my driveway. Before her taillights disappeared around the corner, the phone was in my hand. "Hello?" Amy's musical voice brought me to tears. I was so afraid that I would never again hear a kind word in those pleasant tones that, hearing them so soon, I lost control of myself. "Amy," I sobbed, "I need your help." "Mike, what's happened? Are you okay? Is Lynn there?" "She just left. We had a fight. What's happened?" She barked, instantly on edge. I told her about the last 5 minutes, about the marker, about the confrontation, about the exit. When I finished, I waited for Amy to say something. She didn't say. Now, silence. "Now! You drew on it with a permanent marker." A statement, not a question. "No, I didn't draw on it. It was an accident. You just happened to have a black permanent marker in your hand, and you just forgot to put the cap on, and then just massaged her hand. And you call this an accident?" "Yes." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, Amy's voice was exactly the same as Lynn's, with the same icy modulations. "Didn't you have plans to invite Lynn to dinner tomorrow?" "In Tin Angel?" "Yes." "She can't go to dinner at such a nice restaurant with a big black mark on her arm, can she? Maybe that's why she's so damn angry." The bones in my legs turned to jelly and I fell to my knees. Amy was angry because she was supposed to have dinner with me tomorrow night. Dinner and then home to kiss and cuddle. And if Lynn had a big black mark on her arm, Amy couldn't turn into Lynn, could she? Unless she marked her hand with black ink too. And then, they wouldn't be able to be seen together. Otherwise, everyone would ask, "Wow, you both did the ink with a marker?" "Amy, it was an accident." "You're not clumsy, Mike." There was a pause. Lynn just pulled into the driveway. So fast. She must have been driving like a maniac. "Amy, please give her the phone, please." "Wait. Now." "What?" "Please tell her that I love her. Please, I love her." No answer. She hung up, and then I heard muffled voices in the background. I couldn't make out the words. No one answered the phone for 5 minutes. I screamed into the phone, trying to get both twins' attention. When I heard the phone picked up, I held my breath. "Hello?" Pause. Then a voice trembling with sobs. "Mike, don't call here again. If you call back, it will all be over. I need to think. You understand?" I replied that I understood. Before I could say a word, the line went dead. I hung up. I didn't even know which twin gave the ultimatum. Did it matter? Staggering, I went to the kitchen. I drank a beer, then another, then another. I drank myself into a stupor because that was the only way I could sleep. I slept and had no dreams, only a continuous stream of blackness before my eyes. In Lynn, all my dreams came true, and all my nightmares too. 2 weeks passed. I didn't hear anything. Nothing. I did not eat. I did not sleep. I drank too much. My boss called my parents because she thought I might commit suicide. Mom asked what happened. I couldn't tell her. She asked if I wanted her to talk to Lynn. I begged her not to do this. I still had hope. I still thought that she might come back to me. I waited 14 days of hell, staring at the phone, howling like a drug addict because I couldn't call. I waited for the suffering to pass. I waited for my heart to finally begin to heal. I waited in vain. Every day was worse than the previous one. Every day, the blackness at the center of my soul spreads inside me like hot tar. I was drowning in tears. It was Saturday, a gorgeous October morning. The sky was electric blue. Not a cloud in sight for 5 counties. A light breeze rustled the branches that had lost their leaves a week earlier. The newspaper was lying on the driveway. I went out into the street in a robe and bare feet, not paying attention to the cold, 3-day stubble on my cheeks, hair matted from sweat. A soft voice came from the street, near my mailbox. "Hello?" My head jerked up and I dropped the newspaper. Lynn walked over slowly and picked up the plastic-wrapped newspaper at my feet. Her car was parked in front of my house, where a piney tree hid her from prying eyes. She looked at me, and her dark eyes, catching the faint sunlight, sparkled. She smiled and touched my stubbled jaw with her fingers. "Wow," she raised her hand. "See, you were right. This stigma faded over time." She was trying to joke, and I tried to smile politely. Hey, she said, wiping away the tears that stained my cheeks. She hugged me and held me tightly. My own hands hung at my side. I had no strength to do anything but cry. I had been so devastated by the last 2 weeks that my only reaction to any emotion, despair, rage, joy, was tears. Lynn led me inside. "Come on, let's go to the shower." This was exactly what I needed. I lathered up and scrubbed myself up. And when I came out, Lynn was standing there with my razor and shaving gel. She didn't even notice that I was standing naked in front of her. I sat on the toilet seat while she lubricated my face and shaved me thoroughly. It was the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me. What should I tell her? "How's Amy?" I asked. She smiled. "She is all right. Worried about you." "Why were you worried?" "Because I called your mom and she said you weren't okay." I let out a humorless laugh. "No, I can't cope for the last 2 weeks." She stroked my face with a towel. "I can't cope either." She helped me to my feet and we went into the bedroom. While I was in the shower, she made the bed and filled 2 laundry baskets with dirty clothes. "I missed you, Michael. You didn't call. All you had to do was pick up the phone." She shook her head. "It wasn't that easy." She sat down on the bed, and I did the same. I had a feeling that something important was about to happen, and I did not know whether this would be my salvation or my end. Her voice took on a distant note, as if she was remembering something that happened many, many years ago. "I was so angry with you. I was just so angry." Then she looked at me and returned to the present. "But I love you. I love you and want to be with you." She took my hands in hers. "Can you forgive me and forget that that evening even happened?" This was her way of admitting the truth. And admit that I know what this truth means. She couldn't ask me to pretend I was dating one sister when I was dating both, because then I wouldn't be pretending, would I? Would I agree to live a lie based on mutual love and trust? Could I forget that she and her sister had been carefully deceiving me for the last 4 months? No, I couldn't forget, but I can forgive you everything, anything, but I can't relive the last 2 weeks, not knowing if I'll see you again. I looked at my bare feet. What happened that evening should never happen again. Never. This was my ultimatum, one or the other. They had to decide. Lynn sat for a long time, looking at her hands, then turned to me and smiled. "This will never happen again. I promise." There was something sad in her eyes, something that made my heart feel heavy in my chest. I should have been happy that this nightmare was over, but I wasn't. They both loved me. I loved them both. But it had to end. That's what I told myself. This had to end. We kissed, first tenderly, then with great fervor. I suddenly realized that I was naked. She stood up and undressed. I've never seen her naked. She was so beautiful that it took my breath away, a beautiful, melancholic goddess. "Make love to me," she said. She crawled onto the bed and lay down next to me, her thick brown hair spilling over the pillow. I touched her stomach. Her skin was as creamy white as her face. "Are you sure?" "Yes, please." I felt like a fool. "I have no protection." "Michael, please." It was the most beautiful sight imaginable. This angel lying on my bed, waiting for me to love her. We made slow love. We were sweaty, out of breath, arms and legs tangled together. I rolled off her and lay looking at the ceiling. "I think we'll do it again," I joked and immediately regretted it. The girl lying next to me may never be in my bed again. The other twin could have been the one who became Lynn. I wrapped my arms around her. "I love you. I love you too." I kissed her on the cheek. I whispered in her ear again and again, "I love you. I love you. I love you." So I sang her a lullaby. She fell asleep, and I lay awake for a long time. I was wondering how they would decide. They chose roles for the rest of their lives. I doubted that it would be difficult for them to change jobs. They would simply change classes and colleagues. Nobody will ever know. As far as I knew, they were constantly changing back and forth. Maybe they'll flip the coin again. They would lay out a deck of cards. Maybe the girl I met at the grocery store will win because we met first. I didn't know. But for some reason, I wanted it. I couldn't sleep. My soul was too restless. The next day was Sunday. I gave up my 7 a.m. nap and made Lynn bacon and eggs for breakfast. She left just after 9, saying she needed to take care of some things at home. I knew what things she was talking about. As she left, she stopped in the doorway, turned, and kissed me tenderly on the lips. "Goodbye, Michael," she said, and there was a sense of finality in those words. It was a difficult moment. This nonsense had to stop, but someone could have gotten hurt, someone I cared about very much. The rest of the morning I occupied myself with completing 2 weeks' worth of household chores. Wash, vacuumed, cleaned the toilet. I've been waiting for Lynn's call all day. When the phone finally rang around 2, the tension was so great that I had to swallow to keep my lunch from returning to its place. "Hello," she said. "Hello? I love you." I replied that I love her too. She asked if I could come later, around 5, and I said yes, of course. She was getting her hair done and wouldn't be home until then. She didn't mention what we discussed, and I didn't bring it up. I pulled up to her driveway a little after 5. Lynn met me at the door with a kiss and a hungry look in her eyes. "I hope you had a good rest." "Now at home?" She nodded. "We went to the salon together, but she needs to run a few errands. She will be gone for several hours." "That should be enough time," I said. I placed my hands on her waist and pulled her pelvis towards mine. Oh my God. I heard soft footsteps behind me. A familiar voice said, "Okay, I'll be home in a few hours. It won't be easy." I put a smile on my face and slowly turned to face her. When she appeared in my field of vision, I received one of the biggest shocks of my life. They still had the same shoulder-length hairstyle, but instead of Lynn's shiny copper locks, Amy was now a sunny strawberry blonde. It stunned me. "Amy, wow." She smiled. Perhaps she thought she was hiding it, but I saw sadness in her eyes. "Is everything that bad?" she asked. "Everything is so good, you look fantastic." It was true. She looked incredible. And most importantly, she looked different. Now anyone could tell them apart. It was her sign of surrender to prove that she and her sister had given up on the game. She thanked me for the compliment. And then, without saying another word, she left. I said, "It takes a certain amount of courage for her to decide to change the color of her hair." "This is a big change," Lynn shrugged. Girls do this all the time. She reached down and undid the button on my jeans. Pulling my zipper down, she said, "There's something else people do all the time." This time, we weren't slow and loving. This time, we were at it, hot and hard, both screaming and scratching each other. And I knew that this was the same girl I had made love to that morning. There was no hesitation like the day before. I wonder if Lynn and Amy would go back to their unspoken agreement to stop sharing me. Would Lynn, living with me every day, get tired and leave me? I can't answer this question because I messed things up long before these problems started. I was happy. So happy that it seemed unfair. My face hurt from smiling all day. Lynn was happy too, but her joy was tinged with sadness. It was Amy. She was clearly depressed. We all knew why Amy was sad, but no one could say why. It was taboo. Amy didn't spend her days crying and her nights drinking like I did, but she was unhappy, and it hurt me to see her in this state. It was more than caring for a friend. After all, this was the girl I held in my arms, kissed and whispered in her ear how much I loved her. These lips, constantly frowning, once gave me unimaginable pleasure. She gave me such joy, and it was my fault that she was now unhappy. Perhaps it was not only my fault, there were many to blame, but this does not make it any easier for me. What bothered me even more was my growing attraction to her. Now she was completely different, beautiful in her own way, but still very similar to the girl I was in love with. The changes in her appearance only made the situation even more confusing. But I loved Lynn more than ever. The thought of me leaving Lynn for Amy was laughable. I was already looking for engagement rings and starting to think about a suitable wedding date. We hadn't talked about marriage yet, but it seemed so surprisingly inevitable. In November, the teacher Lynn worked with got married, and we were invited to the wedding. But I couldn't go. I had a project at work, and I had to work that Saturday. I tried my best to wiggle my way out so that Lynn and I could get away for the weekend and maybe talk a little about our own wedding hopes and dreams, but to no avail. On the Thursday before she left, we made love at my house until 2 in the morning, and then, exhausted, I lay back on the pillow until the spots disappeared from my eyes. "You can do me a favor," she whispered. "Oh my God, anything. Could you come to Amy on Saturday? Maybe invite her to dinner just to keep her company. She's a little depressed." This sounded like a really bad idea to me, so I said so. "Why?" she asked. And this puzzled me. If the twins stopped the division of labor, why should I object? A taboo has arisen again. Any problem in this situation will be on my conscience from now on. Did I have a problem? I said, "Well, I should finish around 6. I can come over to your place after work. Maybe we could share a pizza or something, rent a movie." That's what we did. I knocked on the door a little before 7, nervous as a cat. As far as I knew, this was the girl I met at the grocery store. When she opened the door, her gorgeous strawberry hair framed that beautiful face, and I wanted to run and hide. We ate pizza, watched a movie, and it was all very pleasant, right and strange. The tension in the room was so palpable that I could feel it, the sour electric taste of hot metal in my mouth. She looked at me as if she wanted to say something, and didn't. She just smiled. And whatever it was that was making my heart pound, she stepped on the gas. She was lying on the sofa. I was sitting in a chair. She was wearing the typical uniform of a girl coming home for a quiet evening with her boyfriend, sweatpants and a t-shirt. I drank a beer, then another, but the alcohol could not extinguish the fire inside me. I saw her in profile. She was so beautiful that I could not stand it. I loved her strawberry blonde hair. I loved watching her smile. I used to love her. I loved Amy. I couldn't pretend anymore that I wasn't. I used to love her. I loved Lynn. I loved each of them with all my heart. When the movie ended, I wanted to leave and let time and distance clear my head, but she asked me to help her put away the dirty dishes, and I agreed. I wanted to say so much more, but I couldn't because I didn't know what to say. Here is my excuse for what happened. My emotions were seething inside me. My inhibitions were suppressed by alcohol. In fact, this is not an excuse at all. If I had been drinking ginger ale all night, it wouldn't have made a difference. Amy opened the pantry cabinet to put away the garlic salt shaker and couldn't reach the top shelf. She stood up on her tiptoes, and when she reached up, her t-shirt also rose up, revealing a glorious inch of smooth white skin around her stomach. I said, "Here, I'll help." He stepped behind her and took the plastic bottle from her hands. I leaned forward to put the shaker on the shelf, and as I leaned over, my chest touched her back. My face touched her fragrant hair. I dropped the shaker with a soft thud, my nervous fingers dropping it instead of placing it on the shelf. My hands fell on her chest. I wrapped my hands around them and pulled her towards me. I pressed my lips to her neck and kissed her, closing my eyes, hoping that if I couldn't see what I was doing, maybe it would just stop. Amy gasped and squirmed in my arms, but I held her tightly and kissed one side of her neck, then the other. A small cry escaped her lips. She turned around abruptly, grabbed my face, and pressed her lips to mine, and we kissed with such force that her teeth cut my lip. I pulled off her sweatpants and we had sex. It was wild sex. I don't know how long this went on. When we finished, Amy looked at me over her shoulder. I betrayed the woman I loved, and with her sister at that. Another memory I will savor on my deathbed. The very moment when I crushed my hopes for happiness. Amy whispered, "I'm not a virgin anymore," and the surprise and amazement in her voice almost broke me. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," I whispered. "Shh. I can't believe I did this." "It's okay," she reassured. "I like it." I was already sobbing, and Amy took my hands and put my head on her shoulder. I had just taken her virginity, against her will, and she was the one consoling me. She held me until I pulled myself together. "I took you by force." "No, that's not true. If you hadn't touched me first, I would have done it." She kissed the top of my head. "You would never do anything so terrible." "I betrayed Lynn. I love her more than anything in the world, and this is how I treat her." I looked at her serene face. "And you?" She stroked my cheek. "She'll never know. I have to tell her. I can't lie to her like that." "You can't tell her. What will it give?" She took my face in her hands and looked at me intently. "Even if she finds out, Lynn will forgive you." "I know he will forgive. She loves you." It sounded impossible. Then I said, "How can you forgive me?" She kissed me on the lips, a gentle, chaste kiss. "I have already forgiven you." She told me to go home. I went. I hated leaving her, but staying was even worse. I fell asleep around 4 in the morning, completely exhausted. I woke up from the phone ringing. It was noon. "Hi, honey," Lynn said. All I could say was, "Hello," in reply. Luckily, she didn't make me talk much. She said the wedding was great. She had a great time, but she had a few errands to run, and would it be okay if I showed up at, say, 5? I said it's okay. I said I love her. She said she loves me. We hung up. I went back to bed. Would Amy tell her? And I? It's not that I don't know how to keep secrets from my girlfriend, but I didn't know how I could keep this secret, how I could keep myself from Amy, from making love to her again. I used to love her. I loved Lynn. I hated myself. I hated the whole world. At 5 o'clock, I arrived at their house, speechless with excitement. My nervous system, overstressed over the past 24 hours, was no longer providing perfect communication between my brain and body. My right eye was twitching. The fingers of my left hand were numb. I rang the bell. I tried to force a smile, but the corners of my mouth refused to curl. Yes, Lynn won't notice that anything is wrong. Certainly. Door opened. Both twins stood in the doorway. They stood with identical smiles on their sweet faces. They were both wearing white t-shirts, blue jeans, and white sneakers, and they both had strawberry blonde hair. I stood there staring at them for about 10 seconds. They looked exactly the same again. Exactly. The three of us came to one of those moments where we couldn't talk about what was happening. They just smiled and waited to see what I would do. I could have left. I could drag one of them into the house and cut off her hair with kitchen scissors. But I didn't. If I had a white flag, I would wave it. I said, "Wow, you look great." I looked at the space between their heads as I said this. "Thank you," they said in unison. The three of us had a very good dinner, lasagna, garlic bread, and salad. In all this time, I have not addressed any of them by name. I sat on one side of the table, they sat on the other. When we finished, they told me to sit in the living room and relax while they washed the dishes. While I was sitting like a corpse in their chair, one of the twins came in and kissed me. "I love you," she said, and then slipped back into the kitchen. "Lynn," I suggested. And then, a minute later, the other twin came out, kissed me the same way, said the same thing, and left. They tested me all evening, and I passed the exam with flying colors. I didn't even try to figure out who was who. I just smiled and allowed myself to be kissed and touched, and when it was time to leave, I gave each girl a neutral wave and walked to my car. I was a beaten man. I had two options: give up on them both or love them both and see what the hell happened. It was like I had a choice. Let the bones fly. My girlfriend's name was Lynn, her sister's name was Amy. This hasn't changed. As the weeks went by, it almost became the norm. I loved them. They loved me. We were all happy. What was wrong with that? Several months passed, and my friends kept asking, "So when are you two getting married?" Good question. I started looking for engagement rings. I asked Amy what kind of ring Lynn would like. Gold, silver, platinum, princess cut stone, round, pear-shaped. "It's a princess cut stone, set in white gold," she said. "Are you sure?" Her eyes sparkled. "Sure." And she was sure, wasn't she? A month later, I had the ring. Choosing the right moment to ask a girl to become your wife is always difficult. It was a nightmare for me. I didn't know how they would react to the engagement. I prayed that once the lucky lady put the ring on her finger, she would not refuse it. That the ring would be enough to break the spell and end this madness forever. The problem was figuring out which girl to give it to and when. I still believed that one of the twins was the real Lynn, and that she was the one I wanted to marry. But there was no way to know which girl it was. I finally said to hell with it and asked her over dinner at a restaurant in Mount Washington how everyone gets engaged in Pittsburgh. Our table was right by the window, the glittering towers of the Golden Triangle reflected in the smooth Monongahela River. I got down on one knee, asked a question, got an answer, got a kiss, and got a few rounds of applause from our fellow table mates. Everything went flawlessly. "We have to tell Amy," she said, looking at the stone on her finger. "Of course, we'll stop by tomorrow morning so she can—" "We should stop by this evening." I thought we would return to my place. I have a bottle of champagne. After we stopped by Amy's, the waiter came over and Lynn asked if she could take the check. No dessert or coffee. I drove us back to their house with Lynn's head resting on my shoulder. Everything would be so wonderful if not for one small flaw that changed everything. I drove the car with a blank slate in my head. It's a miracle I didn't drive off the Smithfield Street Bridge. Lynn showed Amy the ring. They were both in tears. I gave Amy a brotherly hug, then I hugged Lynn and held her close. And it seemed that everything was fine. We try in our lives to bring a little happiness to others. I somehow made these two women happy. Maybe it would have been better if each of them had met their boyfriend, but that wasn't what they wanted. I couldn't understand why, but if that's what they wanted, who am I to say it's wrong? Lynn took off the ring and gave it to Amy to try on. "It fits," she giggled, admiring the fiery stone in the lamplight. Amy handed the ring back and winked at me. "Don't worry, I didn't mean to keep it." "It's better not. I can't afford two of these." "Oh, if you had to, you could handle it." They both laughed. I managed to smile. I'm a history buff, and I've read dozens of books about World War II. It has always amazed me how the German people managed to ignore the Holocaust that was raging around them. One day you greet your neighbors, and the next day, the Gestapo arrests them and takes them to a camp. And you don't say anything. You act as if your neighbors disappearing every day is completely normal. I thought it was unconscionable that no one could behave like that and call themselves a decent person. I believed this until Lynn and I got engaged. And then I realized how easy it is to pretend that the terrible reality around you does not exist. I, of course, do not equate my ridiculous situation with the tragedy of the Holocaust. I do not want to justify Germany for what happened at that terrible time. But now I understand what cowardice a person experiences when faced with a terrible truth, how he is soothed by the feeling of inertia when taking measures to correct the situation means certain death. I don't feel so smug and confident anymore. We set a wedding date, June 17th. I no longer tried to guess whether they would switch places. I threw the notebook in the trash. My fiancée's name was Lynn. Her sister's name was Amy. Over the course of several months, the girls decided to return their hair to a natural dark blonde, and I was never able to detect any difference in shades when the dyed strands were replaced by hair of its natural color. Not that I spent much time trying. I've trained my mind to ignore everything else. Now I was worried about invitations, hotel bookings, and disc jockeys. This was enough to worry. Finally, the great day arrived. A clear, cool June afternoon. Of course, it was a small wedding since Lynn and Amy had no family other than each other. Lynn invited her students to the ceremony. My family and our friends were there, so the church was full of life. I wouldn't care if the pews were empty. I had eyes only for Lynn, eyes that filled with tears as soon as she entered the church. She walked down the aisle alone, holding a bouquet of white roses, her wedding dress simple and absolutely stunning. Amy was the only bridesmaid, and Rick was my best man. When I took Lynn's hand and we turned to face the priest, I was shaking so hard that I could hear the people behind me murmuring. "Breathe, Mike," Father Phil said, and everyone burst into laughter. Somehow I made it through the ceremony. I said my vows in a clear, strong voice. We exchanged rings, and then it was time to kiss my wife. During the entire ceremony, we did not say a word to each other, but when I looked into her eyes, I felt an almost transcendental euphoria, as if I had grown wings and flew to heaven. Maybe this is what the first few seconds after a fatal stroke feel like, when your dying brain gives you one last push of life before the book closes forever. "Hello, my wife," I said. "Hello, my husband." We kissed. A long, dramatic kiss, with a little dive at the end. We walked out to applause and flashing lights. Finally, we got married. The reception was exactly what I had hoped. A great party. The food was great, the drinks were flowing, and everyone was dancing. I was too busy to pay close attention, but Amy seemed to be having fun too. I was worried about her, as I would have been worried about any unmarried girl whose sister was a princess for a day. But Amy looked great. In fact, she spent most of her time on the dance floor with my great-uncle Fred, who was 86 years old and still giving it his all. Amy looked absolutely stunning in a pale green dress, which, with her blonde hair styled in an updo, gave her a glamorous and dramatic look. "Maybe you picked the wrong one," Rick said, standing at my elbow. "No. You are the luckiest of men. You married well and have great friends. Well, one great friend anyway." He patted me on the back. I wanted so badly to tell my best friend that luck is a double-edged sword, but of course I couldn't. It was already too late for the confession to do any good. "Find yourself a good girl. Fall in love. Marry her," I said. He said, "Well, now that you mention it, your cousin Kelly is quite a pretty girl. I don't think that such a girl can have common DNA with you, but accidents happen. If you allow me, I'm going to dazzle her with my wit and charm." And he left. "Will you ask me to dance?" A favorite voice came from behind me. I turned to embrace my bride in my arms. But it was not my bride. It was her sister. I swallowed, took a deep breath, and extended my hand. "Let's dance." Of course, the slow song started right away, and I gave Amy a brotherly hug and walked her in a clockwise circle, both of us walking on eggshells. "Was today everything you wanted?" she asked. "Even better." We turned once in silence. Then she said, "I know how happy you made her. That's all I ask from you, that you make her happy. I will do it, I promise." She looked up at me, and tears began to flow in those huge blue eyes. Hey, I said, afraid to say anything else. She shook her head. "I'm fine." We made a half-turn when she said, "I just feel like I'm losing her, losing the only family I have." No, it's not like that," I reassured her. "You are now as much a part of my family as Lynn is." I winced a little when I said this, but she didn't react at all, so I continued. I can't imagine that you won't be a part of our lives. You mean too much to Lynn. And I cut to the chase, putting all my chips in. You mean too much to me. The song is over. The damn chicken dance has begun. Amy pulled away from my embrace, her eyes dry. She kissed me on the cheek. Go look for your wife. She left me with a smile on her lips. I spent the rest of the night glued to Lynn. When we finally escaped to our room, I was physically exhausted and my emotions had dried up. We made love quietly. I closed my eyes and imagined Amy in her pale green dress, imagined it was Amy lying underneath me, and that was all it took. It was good, I whispered. The perfect end to a perfect day. We kissed for another minute or so, and then Lynn got up to wash her face before going to bed. I fell asleep before she returned. Our alarm was set for 6 a.m. to give us enough time to get to the airport before our 9 a.m. flight to Puerto Rico. When I woke up, it was a little after 4. I woke up to a noise in the room loud enough to wake me up. It was a sharp metallic click. I muttered, getting up. Lynn's voice came from the foot of the bed. Shh, it's just me. She walked around the bed and climbed under the covers. I needed a glass of water. She lay down and pressed the spoon against my back. I let my head rest against the pillow. Our room was on the top floor of the hotel. I listened and heard a tiny ding from the corridor. Elevator. Who can be up at 4 in the morning? It was Amy. It was the click I heard as the door closed as they switched places. The woman I married before God and family went down one flight of stairs and slept alone the rest of the night, while her sister shared our marital bed. One twin got his wedding day, the other got his honeymoon. My head felt heavy, so I put a pillow on it. 10 seconds later, I was already snoring, sleeping in the sleep of the innocent. When I got home last night, Amy's car was in the driveway. I parked and walked inside. They were sitting next to each other on the couch, sipping tea. I said hello, and they both looked up at the same time and said, hello. I didn't know if my wife was the girl on the left or the right, and neither of them asked me the usual feminine questions like, how was your day? They sat quietly and serenely, with blissful smiles on their beautiful faces, and both barely noticed my presence. It was a little awkward. I felt like I was in some kind of trouble. I said, I'll go upstairs and change. Okay, they said in unison. Make yourself comfortable. I went up to our bedroom, changed my clothes, and stood in the closet over the toilet, emptying my nervous bladder. What's happened? They didn't seem furious, per se, just tense. Something happened while I was away. But what? I threw the napkin into the wastebasket, and only then did I see the box. It was written on it, Home Pregnancy Test. I stared at it for a long time, 10 seconds or so, and when I finally snapped out of my trance, I grabbed the box. I pulled out the box, and there was a plastic tube with a test strip. There was a plus sign on it. Plus meant pregnancy. I began to tremble all over. Lynn was pregnant. We will have a child. I was going to be a father. That's why they're all so weird. Lynn wanted to tell me some big news and was waiting for the right moment. I was so happy that I did a little dance in the bathroom and knocked over the trash can. Several napkins, a used toilet paper roll, and another box fell out. On the box, it said, Home Pregnancy Test. I knelt down and found another white plastic tube. The test tube was also marked with a plus sign. I relaxed until I sat down on the cool tiles. There was a completely reasonable explanation for this. Lynn thought she was pregnant. She took a test and it came back positive. And to double-check, she made another one. Sure. I got dressed and went downstairs, holding tightly to the railing. They were still sitting there drinking tea. They say that a pregnant woman gives off a certain radiance, that she radiates life blossoming within her. I had to raise my hand to shield my eyes from the golden aura that illuminated the two beautiful women sitting on my couch. I think I'll go out for a while, I said. I thought they might ask me, but they didn't. They let me go. I drove to the nearest bar, parked, and handed the bartender my keys, driver's license, and 3 $20 bills. I pointed, Whiskey here, beer here. When you decide I've had enough, call me a taxi and give the driver the address on my license. Pay him with what's left, I live nearby. He looked at me like I was crazy. Fine. He placed a shot of wild turkey to my left and an ice-cold bottle of Bud to my right. I downed my glass, caught my breath, and swallowed 2 calming sips of beer. I take it you're not a whiskey drinker, said the bartender. Nope. I suffocated. More. He poured it. Any problems? This one was a little easier. I took a sip of beer to dull the burning sensation. Women's problems. He grinned. Women. I heard they can be difficult sometimes. I pointed to the glass and he frowned. Are you sure? I shook my head, but I said, yes. After a glass, I drank the rest of the beer. My wife is pregnant. She hasn't told me yet, but I found out about it in another way. I guess I'm just a little surprised. The bartender relaxed, probably glad that I wasn't cheating with the wife of some guy who might burst in with a gun. Well, congratulations, he poured it. Have a drink at the house's expense. I thought the alcohol would slow down the thoughts racing through my brain, but all the whiskey did was act like a giant eraser at the edges of my mind, erasing the rest of the world. I imagined what people would say when they found out. What will Lynn and Amy look like pregnant? Will even the bloating of their bellies be the same? Would they have been born on the same day? Would they have boys or girls? Oh my God, are they both going to have twins? What if they had twins and all 4 children were the same? Would I have to raise my children and not be able to tell them apart? Will my identical children really have identical grandchildren? I had a terrible vision of my house filled with women who looked the same, Lynn and Amy repeated over and over again, different ages but all the same. I raised my hand to get the bartender's attention and a soft hand took my wrist and lowered it back onto the bar. I turned around. She was smiling at me. I think you know, she said. Eh? I looked into the most beautiful face on earth. How did you find me? We thought you might come here, said a voice behind me. You know, don't you? My head turned and the same face was in front of me, smiling. I nodded. I found the boxes in the trash. Oh, so are you happy? The room was spinning. I couldn't figure out who asked the question. Yes, no. This is a big change. Their voices, their faces merged into one. Yes. There was a long pause. They sat on either side of me. They both leaned towards me. We love you. I thought I would feel bad. But it quickly passed. I love you too. I could say, I love both of you. But I was too far away to catch the Freudian blunder. Go home. The bartender saw that I was not alone and came over to take a look. Okay, stop. He could see up close that I was surrounded by 2 gorgeous women. Wow, double vision. The twins laughed. Which one of you is the lucky one? The girl to my left replied, It's me. For some reason I thought Amy was on my left. But it was the girl to my right who said, I'm her sister. Bartender said, You are a happy, happy person. You can't even imagine. The bartender handed over my license and keys, and Lynn paid my bill and left me a big tip. I was an outpatient. I could walk normally, but they each put their hands on mine and led me to the door. They held me tightly, as if they were afraid that I would break free and run away, but the whiskey had already taken over me, and I could barely raise my head. Lynn drove me home, and Amy followed in my car. They took me upstairs and made me drink 2 large glasses of ice water and 4 aspirin to ward off a hangover. Then they put me to bed until I passed out. When I woke up, I had cotton wool, but my head didn't hurt. I focused my gaze on the ceiling fan. Then I looked down. 2 slender arms crossed on my chest. One girl is on my left, the other is on my right. I'm in the middle. We were naked under the covers. I'll be honest, it was the most wonderful way to wake up that I could ever imagine. I lie in bed, repeating the same prayer in my head. God, give me strength. I close my eyes and want to shut myself out from the world forever. But now it's too late. I had to run away at the first opportunity. Love made me a coward. And now there's nowhere to run. The girl to my right winces, then lays her head on my shoulder. The girl to my left sighs. Shh, I whisper. Sleep. We will tell our secrets soon. Sleep. Sleep. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.